And good afternoon. We are live from Canada, Hamilton, Ontario, and Sault Ste. Marie, also from London, UK. We have today with us on Let's Talk Real Talk with Andy Martens and myself, Mary Auld-Kovacs, is Karen Woodall from London, UK. Karen is a psychotherapist who has been an expert witness in the High Courts of England and Wales in the Republic of Ireland for 15 years. She writes on subjects of relational trauma in divorce and separations at karenwoodall.blog, which is read around the world. Her work on healing the harm caused to children in divorce and separation extends from direct therapeutic interventions with family affected by children's ailments, which has been commended by High Courts of England. I think I missed something there, but sorry about that. Today's topic Karen's going to be discussing will be focused on trauma bonding in divorces and separation with children who have been captured in the mindsets of parental alienation. And if anybody doesn't know what parental alienation, Andy and I have talked about it many times, but I'm going to get Karen Woodall to explain it one more time so that we all understand what these children are dealing with and alienated parents as well. So thank you, Karen. Andy, welcome to Let's Talk Real Talk show. I know you're having problems with your show page. And so we have amalgamated together onto my Parent Alienation is Child Abuse page blog. So we are united, and I hope that all groups will amalgamate in order to stop this pandemic in the family court systems, because parent alienation is bringing our children down. So, Andy.
Yes, it is, Mary. And yeah, this is something that they caught up with us, and this is something that's being driven by the Canadian government, where they don't want to pay for the media content from Meta and stuff. So this is beyond our control, but we're working to overcome these issues as best we can. Welcome, Karen from the UK, and we were talking before the show that the UK's got to get used to a new prime minister, but all governments change in time. So, how did your journey begin on parental alienation? For all those that are tuning in, I'm not an alienated parent. I've been with the same woman for 40 years, but that doesn't mean problems just magically don't happen. They do. So, how did your journey become, start with parental alienation?
Thanks, Andy. That's a good question to start. And thank you, Mary, for inviting me on the show. I'm pleased to be here. I'm going to talk about this from a slightly different perspective. Not from the perspective of the label parental alienation, but from the perspective of childhood relational trauma, because that's the overarching umbrella that we psychotherapists are really finding useful in terms of treating the problem. So as a psychotherapist, I work with families affected by children who say, no, I don't want to see that parent, and have done for the past 15 years. And my introduction to an alienated child came in 2009 when I saw a boy with his dad in what you would call a contact center over here, who was having a great time. But 5 minutes before the end of that, said to his dad, I don't know why I'm here. I really hate you. And he walked out and immediately burst into what I can only describe as faux or false tears. And I was really curious about that as a psychotherapist. I thought, what is it that makes children behave in that way? The adults around the child, apart from his mom, could see that he was having a great time with dad. What is it that makes children behave in that way? And I worked with that family for some time. And the boy was eventually removed from his mother on the basis that she had a what's called factitious illness, which is, it used to be called Munchausen's by proxy. And what kind of emerged from that work was that his mother had been making him ill every time it was time to see his father. And he believed that his father was the cause of his illness. And the switching behavior that I saw and found so curious was something that I've seen in children over and over and over and over again. So I knew really from that early experience that here was something that needed closer attention. And as a psychotherapist, I'm curious about people's behavior. And that's what really led me down this road. But as I say, as a psychotherapist, I think of it as a family relational or a family attachment trauma. And I'm going to explain in a bit why it's important to get to grips with that concept, because as parents who are rejected by children, there's an awful lot of power in understanding relational trauma.
Mm.
Right,
Yeah.
great. Yeah, that's interesting. Exactly. It's a complicated topic, and not everybody understands that. So, Mary, are you still sharing, or are you finished?
I'm still sharing, but I am
Okay,
listening.
yeah.
But
Okay.
you
I
know,
could continue with one more question then.
okay, I just want to say that, you know,
Okay.
I've seen this happening to my own children for 19 years. I've been alienated. And when they did get to see me, they were all happy and smiling. But soon as they saw me, their eyes went stone cold, as if, you know, they looked right through me. And it got worse over the years. So it's more important to nip that in the butt right at the beginning, right? Instead of waiting for years down the road.
Well, it really depends on whether it's possible to nip it in the bud, because the problem that we've got with this trauma for children is that it's the dynamics around the children that cause it, but the impact is in the children. It's in the inside of the child, and that stone cold, nobody there, dead eye, as you've just described, is the impact of the attachment system powering down. We would call it powering down. It's the attachment system which is under threat from a parent who is causing the children to maladapt their attachment relationships. And so the whole system, which is actually, you know, mediated through the gaze, attachment happens through our eye contact. You know, if somebody's looking at you and
Yes.
they're looking at you with love and affection, you can see that they're there because the mirror neurons in the brain are active and you can feel it in your solar plexus. Well, these children, their attachment system is really, really down to almost zero, but not quite zero. It's really important to remember. Attachment never dies and it never disappears. It's always there, but it can be turned down. It can be temporarily switched off or turned down.
And how would you do that, Karen?
How would you switch it down? Turn it off? That comes through the trauma bond. So children who are in a relationship with an unpredictable parent who has control over them will eventually get the message that there is a particular way to behave towards this parent. And that behavior must be regulating. It must be regulating and reassuring. So those children become hyper-focused on an unpredictable or frightening, influencing caregiver. And that's when the attachment relationship to the other parent, the loving, healthy parent, is dialed down to the degree where the child begins to what we call psychologically split their internal experience. The frightening caregiver, the one that's causing harm, becomes idealized, and the healthy parent, the one that the child is rejecting, becomes demonized. And why is that? Well, there's a really simple explanation for it. And that is children will do anything to stay safe in the care of a caregiver. And if that caregiver has control over them, they're going to give that caregiver what they want.
Yes.
And they're going to reject the other parent.
100%. I was an alienated child myself, married to an alienated child, but I saw my family the whole time, whereas my ex was stripped of his father since he was a tiny baby. So he never had a father, and he enmeshed with my family to seek love, attention. And this is how I see a lot of our alienated children are doing by other families, by trying to fit in because they're missing what they had one time. Now, is that a psychological problem for them?
Yeah, I mean, this is what we would call an attachment maladaptation. So our attachment relationships are adaptive. It means we can adapt our behaviors to fit in, but they become maladaptive when they are making us behave in ways which are not appropriate. And it's interesting that you've just raised that issue of children sort of fitting themselves into other families, because I see alienation of children an awful lot in foster families. Yes. Where foster children become alienated by the foster carers against the biological parents. And I also see children being alienated by one family system against the other family system, against the biological family system. So this is not just a problem that happens in divorce and separation. It happens in other human relationship family settings as well. And when you understand what the child is doing, maladapting attachments to try and find safety, it becomes much easier to understand what it is that's going on. And then when you understand that, you can go and look at what it's possible to do in those circumstances.
What age do you think is the easiest to get through to when they've been alienated? Is it younger or older? I know my kids were teenagers. Once they were set, they were set.
It's interesting because it really depends on so many factors. There are so many variables in this. It depends on the age that the child went into psychological splitting in the first place. Mm-hmm. It depends on the sensitivity of the child. Most kids who become psychologically split, which is what lies beneath the alienated state of mind, are very sensitive and very clever, very bright children, and they're very attuned to other people, particularly adults. It depends on how long they were in the split state of mind. But there are, because I've worked with families now for 15 years, and I've worked with well over 100 seriously alienated children, kids who have made false allegations and terrible things said about the parent that they were rejecting. I've been able to collate the patterns that children show as they go into this state of mind and then as they come out of it. And it's very clear that there are stages where it becomes more possible to really reach out and trigger a change in the child. And then there are stages where you just wouldn't go near it because the child is too fixed. So the first stage is the entry into the split state of mind. The second stage is what I call the black void, where they've disappeared completely and they don't want anything to do with you at all. Mm-hmm. The third stage is the emergent stage, where their behavior is unpredictable, but they start to reach out. There are opportunities within that stage to really help them to understand what's happened. And then in the fourth stage, which is the longer term recovery, there are some really good points at which they can hear you, because these kids can't hear you. You can shout, you can show them, you can punish them, pull them, push them, try anything that you want to. If they're in stage 2, they ain't going to listen because they can't hear.
Wow. Andy.
It's really mind-boggling to get your head around. Now, I've got a tough question for you, Karen. Narcissism runs in a family. One, like I'm using my wife's family as an example. One person alienates her sister's kids. Can somebody else in the family have like some personality disorder pieces of that, like compulsive lying and all of that, but not be a narcissist and alienate children? Can there be bits and pieces that somebody else has that isn't the full narcissist type?
Yeah, and you don't have to be a narcissist to alienate kids. I mean, you can be, unpredictable. You only have to be unpredictable, kind one minute, cruel the next, warm one minute, cold the next.
Sort of like you're looking at a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde kind of deal.
Sure.
Even jealousy.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And remember, children respond to the symbolic rather than the language. So if you've got somebody who is, there's no narcissistic traits there at all, but they are a bit crazy, unpredictable, and the kid starts to feel a bit sort of something's off, but that happens in a situation where the kid can't escape from it, then eventually over time, the child will trauma bond to that person and will begin to think that that person is absolutely wonderful, is absolutely perfect, because that makes life feel safe for the child. We know it's distorted and back to front, but for the child, it's the easiest way to feel safe. And of course, it's all unconscious. It's all part of a defense mechanism. Right. But to go to your point about narcissism, often narcissistic traits or personality disorder, like all the disorders, are passed down the generational line in the attachment relationship, and the child exposed to that learns to believe that that is what love feels like. So you get kids growing up feeling that trauma and abuse is love, and they go forward into relationships with people who are like the person that's done this to them. In a very small group, they will do to others what has been done to them. But I see in my clinical practice that it's much, much more that alienated children become alienated parents. Yes. Because they bond with people who are like the person who abused them.
Yeah. That's how I could separate the two, where I grew up with my family so I wouldn't alienate my children. I pushed them onto their father. He was a soldier, always gone. And when he was home on leave, he still went somewhere because he couldn't deal with a family. He needed his freedom. So he alienated himself. And then the kids, when he walked in, would be at first terrified. It took 4 days, just like reunification, right? I knew all about it. First day, the kids were scared. Second day, they, Dad would say, "Oh, punch mommy," to make them laugh. So they would punch me, and they were conditioned to become abusive. By the third day, Dad's already like playing ball with them. Fourth day, he's neglecting them again. So the kids are in this routine of being trauma bonded, thinking that this is how Dad loves. Let's have Dad go away again. So let's act up and be bad so Dad will go away. This is the kind of relationship I saw in a lot of military families, because what person comes back after being 6 to 12 months gone and fit right back into that same spot? They don't. They need to, reunify themselves as well, to the spouse, to the children, to their environment. And it's parent alienation is getting so bad in the military. And children run to the military that are alienated to get that conditional love from some kind of a group, a cult, whatever we want to call it. We know what it is. So the kids need that. Oh, my dad did that, so I'm going to do that. They're going to do it to their partners. So it is learned.
Yeah, it's a transgenerational trauma transmission. It passes through the attachment. We learn to parent through being parented ourselves, and we repeat often the mistakes that our parents made, or we try to do the opposite. We're only really truly free if we are conscious of all the patterns that went on in our childhood. And there are not many people who go into being a parent conscious of all the patterns that occurred in childhood. So it's interesting that point about the military is really interesting. What you said there about he needed to reunify with you, reunify with the kids, reunify with the environment. He needed to reunify with himself as a father in that situation. That's what's happening to these children. They are psychologically split inside. So their defensive structure creates an awareness of consciousness of one feeling and unconsciousness of the other. So there's a disconnect inside the child when they're in this state of mind.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And as we know what we are dealing with, when we recognize it, we try to make it better. But when it comes to one of the partners want to separate or divorce, that's where we get hit the hardest.
And that's where children are vulnerable, because when the external world separates, the internal world comes under pressure. And so children often divide themselves into, mom's ally or dad's ally, and rejecting the other parent because it's a reflection of the outside world. And what they're trying to do in a very, very frightening environment is to stay. They want to stay integrated. They want to try and pull people together, and when they fail to do that, they have to resolve it somehow. And alignment with one and rejection of the other is the way that they resolve it. And it's a horrible, horrible trauma for these children. It is just the worst. I work with them all the time and have done for 15 years, and I see the damage that it does at the point of splitting. I see the damage that it does when they can't reconcile the two parts of themselves, the self-blame, the shame, the guilt, the helplessness. It's a ghastly trauma for children to experience. And yet, I look into the outside world and I see people almost playing football, soccer, as you would say, with the lives of these kids, arguing over whether or not this issue exists. Of course it exists. It's existed as long as there have been human relationships. What we need to do, what we really need to do, is work out, how do we get power into the hands of parents in the rejected position? How do we help as many people as possible to heal this in the child?
Yes. And that's education in the family courts, right? Lawyers, doctors, therapists. I mean, we all need to be on the same page.
Yeah, we do need to be on the same page, but I'm not one of those we all need to be singing from the same hymn sheet people. So, for example, you don't hear me talking about parental alienation theory, and you don't hear me talking about the label parental alienation. You'll hear me talking about childhood relational trauma, because that's an evolution. It's an evolved way of thinking about the problem, and it gives us access to the healing strategies that we need, and it puts them into the hands of the parents who can make the biggest difference. And this is not for me. This field is too full of do it this way, do it that way, this is the right way, this is the right way, sing from this hymn sheet, sing from that hymn sheet. That's not necessary. The only hymn sheet we need to sing from is, How do we help these kids to heal, and how do we get them into the care of the parent that has been rejected, because that's the parent from whom healing can flow.
Right. We have Voices of Hope. One of the groups I deal with, she writes, grateful for all your work to all of you. So thanks, Voices of Hope. I mean, we need a lot of support out there to deal with this, because it's truly heartbreaking how many parents and grandparents out there are dealing with, not seeing their children or grandchildren. And it's not just, a handful, it's millions.
Mm.
So, Andy, put your 2 cents in there.
Well, yeah, that's right, Mary. And I was just going to say, that's why Mary and I make a great team. We think alike. That's why we do these shows, because somebody might be involved with this and not know what the heck is going on. And it's a continuous education process. But yeah, I have to go shortly. But Karen, I wanted to ask you, with personality disorder, two ingredients, in my opinion, in that personality disorder umbrella are control and compulsive lying. Would I be correct with that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, compulsive lying is often seen, it's seen in narcissism, but it's also seen in histrionic and borderline personality disorder, which is now called unstable personality disorder. So yeah, absolutely. And compulsive lying can also be a control mechanism. It can be a way of controlling somebody and making sure that that person doesn't know that they're being controlled. But this whole issue, this whole transgenerational trauma, is all about control. That's the big, fat, powerful toad, if you like, that sits at the heart of this. It's about control, and it's about trauma which has gone out of control in somebody's life, and they need to control other people in order to keep that trauma at bay.
And they don't have the skills, or they don't want to have the skills. If you have a relationship, if you're married, or I keep telling people, and I will continue to tell people, we have a relationship like Mary and I do these shows. It's give and take. You cannot be entitled, controlling, and compulsive lying to the other person. It's a choice. If you want to do it the right way, you will do it the right way. You wake up, it's like a light switch every day. Am I right about that, Karen? These people make the wrong choices.
I think let's be a little gentler on them. I don't think they have the capacity to make choice in the way that me and you might make choices, because the mirrors that they have looked in as they've grown up have been distorted, and they've not had healthy parenting, which has helped them to make good choices. And they don't have the same empathy circuits in the brain, in the sense of self, so they can't connect to other people in the same way that you or I may be able to connect to.
Right. Mary can connect to me, and she's able to connect better than what she saw being married and her children and all this. But luckily, my father was right on the bit. My mother's family and her were dysfunctional, and you pay a big price for that in life if you continue that way. And like you say, Karen, you don't have the capacity to switch or make different choices.
Absolutely. And for those of us who grew up in the shadow of dysfunctional family settings, and there are many millions of people around the world who did, it's about having the strength of mind to make a choice where you can make it to do something different with your own life. And I think that's the difference between those who are personality disordered and those who are not, when you're looking at that dysfunctional family background. The ones that are not personality disordered can make that choice.
One more quick question, and I will leave it on to Mary, is Is narcissism and personality disorder genetic, just like I believe alcoholism is?
I don't think so. I think it is a learned behavior passed in the attachment relationship. And I think it's all about unresolved trauma coming down the family line, and the attachment that the child makes to the person with that kind of disorder, really teaching that child that this is normal behavior. It's normalizing the abnormal through the attachment relationship.
Because that's how they grew up.
Yeah.
All right. See you guys later. Take
Bye,
care.
Andy. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Okay, it's just the two of us. But yes, I know that growing up, if you grew up in a family with good morals, a lot of respect, routine, and then you marry someone who is basically a latchkey kid, there's going to be so much conflict because one's free, the other one is set on routine, pattern. So when you bring up your children that way, or trying to bring up your children to meet middle, it's almost impossible because the latchkey parent, I'm sorry I have to use that, but that's the only way I can, because they've got the runaround. They got to do whatever they wanted their whole entire life, where the other one is always, monitored, their strict family or whatever. And when you're trying to raise your children, like, split down the middle, it's almost impossible because the other one says, oh no, you're too protective, you're this, you're that. And then the other one will say, well, you're so lenient that who knows, the child's going to run out and, start drinking, doing drugs, and everything's thrown out the window.
And just as you're talking there, you're talking about a split world. You're talking about a split environment. So a child comes into the middle of that, and mom who grew up in the house with routine says, it's breakfast time at this time, and then you go to school, and then you come back and you do your homework and your chores, and then it's supper time. Dad who grew up in a sort of free-for-all says, hey, we're going to go out and play ball, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to blow that routine out of the window. Well, the child in the middle of that doesn't receive a consistent mirroring, so they can't look into a consistent mirror of who they are, because children build their sense of self through looking at their parents for validation and reflection and so on. And I think some children become vulnerable to alienation long before the family separates, because of that very different basic environment which is around them. And in actual fact, young kids need routine. They need things to be predictable, and when they're not predictable, they themselves feel unsafe. And so the instability begins where it shouldn't. There's instability where there shouldn't be, and then there's vulnerability when the family actually separates, and the child then has to navigate this space, and the conditions are already there inside the child for that kind of splitting that causes alignment with one parent and rejection of the other.
Right. So let me ask you, once the child is now 18 and they are so messed up, I know a lot of them would commit suicide, murder, suicide, school shootings, drugs, alcohol, runaways. How do we control this issue?
Well, look, for me, the hope for these children, the hope for that generation, lies in the hands of parents in the rejected position. One of the things that was astonishing to me in my clinical work was the recognition that these children actually have something recognizable going on. We can call it alienation, we can call it psychological splitting, that actually what's going on is they've got disorganized attachment relationships. And disorganized attachment relationships, which is often called fearful avoidant, it causes kids to behave in a particular way. They become too close, they go far away, they become unpredictable, they become frightening, they become omnipotent, they believe that they're in charge of the world. It's a recognizable pattern of behavior in exactly the same way as we would recognize it in neglected kids or sexually abused kids or physically abused kids. Now, when I recognized that, I recognized there was something we could do about it. Okay, what we have to do now is teach parents in the rejected position how to work with disorganized attachment behavior. We've got to we've got to skill them to be therapeutic parents. Then we've got to help them to work out when is the right time to step forward and offer the chance to reconnect and get proximity. Some of them will do it through the court process if you've got a decent court system. Some of them will do it when the child hits a particular age. My thinking was, okay, I know when these kids are ready to step forward. I know when they're ready to receive.
Mm-hmm.
What we've got to do is teach parents that. We've got to teach them how to track their kids over time. And when the time comes, use the therapeutic parenting skills, which are all about healthy reflections, absorbing the child's negative behavior. So, the kid is going to be negative because that's how they've maladapted. Absorb it, understand it, not react to it, and then reflect back what they want from the child. Now, when we do that, and we've done that with many families, both inside and outside of the court process over the past 4 years, particularly, when we do that, the child reacts differently. There's a stability, a stabilization in the child, because the child suddenly recognizes, somebody's out there who can stand up to this behavior and not shame me. And so we have to teach parents that this has to be done consistently, because routine is absolutely essential. So your signaling to the child has to be consistent. It has to be in a routine. It has to be predictable. And you've got to keep going, because we were talking earlier about the way that the attachment system powers down or turns itself off. In order to turn it back on, the child has to be exposed to the parent many, many times to get the attachment system to work. Now, the magic of the attachment system is, once the attachment system wakes up, it motivates, it pushes the child towards the parent. But what it does is it often causes chaos, because the child then returns to the parent, lands into the middle of their life, causes chaos. The parent doesn't understand what's going on. Then the child disappears again because they've got this disorganized attachment. And the parent goes back into this, oh my goodness me, I've lost them all over again. Well, they haven't lost them all over again. The kid is just going through this ping pong phase, back and forth, until they can reorganize their internal experience. So there's a huge amount that can be done, and a huge amount of information and guidance that parents can get. And the biggest thing is, parents can reframe themselves and their understanding of themselves away from being rejected or targeted or, the bad parent, all that stuff that goes on, and recognize that they are the healthy parent who can heal.
Mm-hmm.
And I see them heal over and over again. And people say to me, oh, you do this work and you're the therapist and I can't do this work without you. Well, the truth of the matter is, and any reunification therapist or any therapist who does this work who doesn't acknowledge this is doing everybody a disservice, in my view. We therapists can't do what we do without healthy parents in the rejected position, because I haven't got the attachment relationship with the child. Right. Only the parent has the attachment relationship. Exactly. So I can facilitate it. I can be the midwife to it. I can create the conditions for it, but I can't wake it up only the parent in the rejected position can do that. And they do again and again.
Yes. I had a psychotherapist 2 years ago who was preparing me for a trial that ended last year after 18 years alienated. I saw a therapist in over the 19 years now, but nothing like this one to prepare me for the trial. When you go through a divorce, it's like, boom, you got hit, you're dealing with it, right? But many of us can't deal with it because it just happens so fast. But as I was preparing for the trial, I said to the therapist, I said, thanks for getting me here. He says, no, you did it yourself.
Absolutely.
And he said he learned a lot through what I went through in order to show that we can, not that we can heal 100%, because I have severe PTSD, prolonged grief disorder, because it's living a death of a child that's still alive. I have lived, my child would be 37 years old. She died. So I've lived through the real death to being the alienated death is what I call it. And it's like many would lose it already. Many parents would suffer with worse conditions, but I helped myself through my music, took walks. I knew my kids were going to be 18. Once they're 18, I knew in my head they can't stop. I can't stop them because I said that to my mom. I'm 18. You can't stop me. Sure enough, she couldn't. So once I knew that the kids were 18, it kind of eased myself. I got to step back and look at what they were going through over the years. And I truly saw they were suffering, and I tried to reach out in a gentle way. Sometimes it didn't work out the way I wanted it, and they came back with severe backlashes. And that's what a lot of parents are telling me today, that the backlash, well, we need to understand too that the backlash is because they're hurting, and they want to show us they still love us, but they don't know how.
The backlash comes from the false part of the false persona. You know, there are two parts, at least two parts to these kids: the false self and the true self. Winnicott, who was a psychoanalyst in Britain, talked about how the false self is presented to the outside world in circumstances where the child has to defend themselves against something. Well, you know, the true self has to be protected. And what's magical about this defense, and I see this over and over again, is this false self, which is horrible. They're obnoxious. They're really nasty versions of themselves, but it's a false persona. So when they lash out, I always say, great. We've triggered the false self, which means we've got some action. We can do something about it. When they lash out, just let it chug by. Okay, that's the false self. We know that behind the false self, there is the true child that you always remember. And I see these kids coming out of this split again and again. The true self is still there, intact, a little bit battered, a little bit bewildered, can't quite figure out what happened there. But if they've got a parent in who they've rejected, who has stayed there and is present when they are able to get over this splitting, they do very, very well.
Yes, I know I did. I you know, it was hard because I was being alienated twice by my family and by my ex-husband. Took me around the world, so I never saw my family. But when I did get to see my family, I got pushed away because I left them. But I didn't leave them. It's just how marriage got us there, right? So we get punished twice in situations like that. But I held firm and never gave up on my family. I didn't give up on my ex-husband. He gave up on me. I went to therapy with him, but it just didn't work. Marriage counseling ruined everything for us. But at least I got to speak what I wanted to say, that I've been fighting for 30 years in the marriage. But it just, you know, he couldn't understand that I was saying it in love and not in having him put me in prison, because he was scared. You know, so I lost my kids due to false allegations, and many parents are dealing with this today.
Mm, mm.
What do you do when you have parents like that come in and need help?
Well, I've worked with parents who have faced all sorts of allegations. I think the worst allegations I've ever heard were allegations of cannibalism, that the
Oh,
father had supposedly killed somebody, and there'd been cannibalism and all sorts of stuff. And in those circumstances, what we do at the family separation clinic is, first of all, we stabilize the parent who is in that situation. There are two ways that we work at the clinic. One is inside of the family courts, and in the family courts we work after fact finding. So when the facts are found, as they were in this case, he'd been accused of all sorts of heinous things, and none of those things have been found. We then work to do the reunification between the children and the parent that they've made allegations against. But we also work outside of the court process where children are making allegations, not necessarily severe allegations, but they're claiming things happened. Maybe they say, oh, there was a fight and mom hit me and or pulled my hair or things like that. And what we always say is, look, if those things have even a nugget of truth, then you must acknowledge what's true, but never acknowledge things which are not true. Because if you do, what you will do is you will drive the almost sort of delusional framework that the child is operating in. You'll drive it into a more entrenched position. So acknowledge the things that happened if you agree that they happened, but don't acknowledge what doesn't happen. But mainly my work with serious false allegations has been in the courts, and as a treating expert, I don't assess. So this is another reason why I'm more interested in treatment than I am in diagnosis. As a treating expert, we always work after the court has found on the facts. Now, in order to treat kids who have made serious allegations that are not found to have any evidence to them, you have to use a very strong structural framework, which really requires that the child encounters the parent that they've rejected in a safe, protected environment as quickly as possible. Because the longer that it goes on, the longer it goes on after a child has made such an allegation, the worse it gets, because the child actually knows that they know that it's false, and then they start to get anxious about what that means. So we provide protected space. We bring the child and parent together, and 9 times out of 10 we get that sort of I don't want to do it, you can't make me do it, oh hi daddy. It just disappears in a puff of smoke. Occasionally we'll get more resistance. I did some work in London not recently now, a couple of years ago, where the kids just ran away and ran away and ran away and ran away, because behind the scenes their mom was kind of making them do that. They were still trauma bonded to her. But eventually, once we got them into a sort of routine and protection, then they were able to drop the defense, and the truth comes out. So it's about structural protection, and this is all about boundaries. This is all about holding boundaries around these children. This is an anxiety-based dynamic which occurs because the child feels unsafe. They're being threatened by the influencing parent, and they're making allegations to try and manage the system.
Exactly. And they're also trying to get some kind of validation from them. Look, Dad, did I do good? Look, Mom, did I do good? Did I do this? Am I doing it right? See, I hurt Dad or I hurt Mom again. What do I get for it? A lot of times they're being hand out money. I mean, I know my children, Dad's paying their rent. Why? To keep them, on his side. They're adults. They're in their 30s. They have no no lives of their own. They don't even have children. I may never have my grandchildren. And my youngest, she was 31 right after the trial ended last year, said, I will never get to see my grandchildren. And when she does have grandchildren, she will tell them what an abusive, alcoholic, crackhead mother I was. I never drank. I never did crack in my life. 31 years old, you know, because 18 years of it was embedded into them, that your mom's
Absolutely.
this, your mom's that.
Yeah.
And
And
meanwhile,
the only people that lose out here are the children. You're losing out, but she's losing out, and her children will
yes,
lose out. They'll lose out on their grandmother. They'll lose out on normal, healthy relationships. It's a cruel internalization of self-abuse. Actually,
right.
it teaches the child to abuse themselves.
Yes. You know, my son, my mom's 92, and she reached out. She called him twice. He hung up, or that he was just not answering the phone for her. I called last 2 weeks ago for her. He hung up right on both of us. And he's 37 years old. It's his birthday today. So I want to wish my son in the Royal Canadian Navy. He's been in the Navy for 17 years. I've been following his career. He's an artist. He's suffering. He's suffering, but I want to wish him a happy birthday and know that I'm always here for him. I'm going to give him a call today. Try one more time. I don't give up. I'm not one of those parents that will give up. I'll give them space.
Yeah, you
But I
must never
won't
give
give
up.
up.
You must
No,
never give up. You
never.
must never ever, because their well-being and their children's well-being relies upon the parent in the rejected position having the strength to keep going and keep being there and keep standing there and keep signaling for as long as it takes for them to be able to come back to themselves. You know,
Yes.
the first thing that we want them to do is to come back to their own sense of self. After they've done that, then they can sort out their relationships with other people. And it's interesting that in all of the work that I've done therapeutically, the child reconnects to self through reconnecting with the parent in the rejected position, and it can occur almost instantaneously. You know, when they encounter that parent and things around them feel safe enough, there is that aha moment.
Yes.
This is what I've lost. This is why I felt the way I felt. Now I need to really do the work to properly reconnect and repair. And I think as the world around us becomes more, alienated from itself almost, you know, we've got wars going on and we've got horrible environments and changes. As that occurs, these kids will feel more and more unsafe. And what I hope is that all parents in the rejected position all will understand that the more united the message that can be given to these children, we're here, we've always been here, we can give you that part of yourself that you have denied. It's here for you. We've kept it safe for you here. You can have that with us. You know, it's not about we want you to have a relationship with us. It's not about our rights. It's about we have waited for you so that we can help you to go back for the bits that you left behind, because that's what parents do.
Yeah.
And if kids can hear that, and I think there are more and more alienated kids who are starting to really wake up and understand what's gone on. We've got kids over here who are speaking at a symposium in September, who are adults who went through all of this. There are kids in America who have gone through this, who have grouped together and, you know, are raising awareness. I think as that begins to occur, we'll see the paradigm shift that we are looking for, where the outside world recognizes this hidden child abuse. And it's interesting, the more the people campaign against it, the louder the voices that try to hide it, the stronger the reality and the evidence of this harm grows. And it's often at the point of greatest change that there is the greatest opposition. So, I just want to say to people who are watching, don't be downhearted when there's resistance. Don't feel that the project to raise this child abuse to public consciousness is going away. It's not. It's continuing. It's really reaching the places that it needs to reach, and I think it will reach a critical point where it will be recognized around the world. And I don't actually think that will be very far away now.
Yeah. In 2014, I reunited with my father, but he was in palliative care. I walked into the hospital room with 8 patients, and no, actually, sorry, there were 6, 3 on each side. And when I looked to my left, by the time I look back to my right, the first bed, I hear a voice, "Are you my daughter?" He was on life support. All of a sudden, bells were ringing. I said, "Yes, Dad," but the nurse was putting all the needles into him and stuff to feed him. She thought my friend that came with me was making fun, and she was really angry. But when I said, "Yes, Dad, it's me," it was a miracle. He came to life, and he recognized me on life support. So the whole hospital at the time knew that my stepmother kept him away from me, and that when I reunified with my dad, she kept telling them for 5 years. I was there every week for 5 years. Don't let her in. Don't let her in. Don't let her in. So they saw that my dad was 87 by the time he died. So they saw that this is happening to many of the seniors in the senior home, where the kids have rejected the parent that's, ready to go to rest. And they were so proud that I didn't give up on my dad, even though he couldn't get out of the hospital, he couldn't get out of bed. They had to Hoya lift him. But I was there for him because I hadn't seen him for all those other years. And I never had a relationship with him. But I had the best relationship with my dad for 5 years. And I just wish I could do this with my kids. I don't want to be on my deathbed for my kids to come see me, because that was no life for my dad. He didn't want to live, but he saw my face and he wanted to live. So there was a difference when I left to when I came.
And what you've just described, I think, is a sort of message of absolute hope for every parent that has ever been rejected, including you yourself, because what you've described is that the reality, attachment never dies.
No.
And our tribe is our tribe. Our family connectedness is our family connectedness, and we feel it in our hearts and our bodies. We respond to it, viscerally. He comes round from being on life support because his daughter is there. So I think that it's a powerful message of hope, and it's something that I have seen again and again, and for you yourself, Mary, keep that in your heart, because that's the lived reality. That's the absolute reality of this.
It gives me hope for my kids too. Like I said, I don't want them to come see me on my deathbed, but I'm still young enough for them to say, "Hey Mom, let's go for a walk," or
of course. Yeah, absolutely. Keep signaling. Keep going, Mary.
I do.
I have to hop off now, I'm afraid.
Okay. Yes, we're hit the hour, and I just want your last words to our viewers out there. What do you recommend to someone that's going through this, like today, tomorrow?
Well, first of all, listen carefully to what you've just said, because that's a story of hope, if ever I heard one. But the second thing to say is, when you are connecting, signaling, writing, messaging, when you are beaming out to your children, keep it consistent, keep it short and hopeful. Keep reminding them who you are and that you will always be there, and you will never, ever go away. And when you do that, don't do it sort of, for 3 weeks and then leave it for 3 weeks, or do it for 3 weeks and then not do it again for another month. What you said earlier, Mary, is absolutely right. Routine and consistency. We say routine, rhythm, recovery. Children respond to knowing where you are and being able to see where you are, so that when they're ready, when they can get free, they know that they're safe in your hands.
That's right.
And never lose hope, never give up, and never ever lose hope, because I see kids coming back of all ages. I've just seen one kid come back 48 years old.
Nice. Yeah, I was 50. Wow.
Yeah.
So there's hope. So thank you so much, Karen Woodall. Thank you for everything you've put out here today for parents, grandparents, and alienated children, not to lose hope, because there is hope out there for all of us. Just depends on how we handle situations as well. And, to the alienating parent, please put your stuff aside, your jealousy, your hate, and think of the children. The children need to be loved by both parents. So until next time, let's join us on Let's Talk Real Talk Sunday night, the 21st, I believe. And we have Catherine Ray coming to share her view on parent alienation as well. So Karen, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank
God
you.
bless.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Welcome.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.